Hey, welcome back to the All Access Podcast. My name is Wayne Brown. I'm so glad that you joined us today. I'm so pumped about the podcast today because it's going to be really good. We're going to be talking about small groups. I'm going to introduce our guests in just a moment. But today's podcast is sponsored by Novity. Novity helps us to maximize your church's engagement. If you want to learn how to do that, you can go to novitybrand.com. Now, I'm also excited because we have Empower Conference that's coming up, Empower in BoldX. It's going to be awesome. And I want to encourage you to come. It's going to be June 12th through the 14th. You can go to BethanyAllAccess.com to sign up. I'm telling you, it's going to be a great conference. Come to Baton Rouge, eat some gumbo with us. It's going to be awesome. You're going to have a great time at this conference. Pastor Robert Madu, Pastor Michael Berto. It's going to be awesome. Our pastor is going to be speaking. It's going to be really, really great. You don't want to miss that conference. We want to also ask you guys to follow us on Instagram at Bethany All Access, or you can like and subscribe on YouTube at Bethany All Access. And I'm telling you, you can keep up with us and all the things that are going on in All Access. Now, like I said, I'm pumped about this podcast because we have two amazing guests. I'm going to be talking about small groups. We have Meagan Stockstill that's here today, and we're so glad that you're here. Meagan will give you an opportunity to let us know a little bit about what you do here at the church. And Megan's a phenomenal small group leader and has a lot of insight on that. And then we also have Jennifer Zachary that's here with us today as well. Jennifer oversees all of our small groups for the entire church, and I know she's got a lot of great insight. Now, Megan, you're from Pensacola, Florida.
Pensacola, Florida.
Awesome. And you've been in Baton Rouge for how long now?
It's right at 16 years,
Wow.
which is wild. I'm almost to the point where I've lived here longer than I lived there. So that's an interesting fact. But yeah, came years ago to do a program the church offered with the full intention of just coming and going back, and just fell in love with the church, fell in love with the people. And I've been here ever since and absolutely love what God is doing here in Baton Rouge.
That's great. That's great. How long have you been leading a small group now?
Goodness. So I started, even before I moved here, we would do like youth girl groups, junior high, high school. So I was probably, fresh driving 16, 17.
Wow.
So for a long time. Then of course back here, back in 220 days, leading young adult youth groups in my home, and just really loving it. Took a break for a little while once we got married to kind of establish that rhythm, and quickly realized, I'm in like women's ministry now, and so started a women's group a couple years back and have really enjoyed it. It's one of those things that you get into kind of maybe reluctantly or kind of fearful at first, but then you get going and you're like, I can't imagine not doing this, not having these relationships. And so, yeah, a long time.
Yeah.
Long
well,
time.
we hear so many great reports about your group, and we're so glad that you're here today. Jen, you're from, tell us.
Born and raised here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yep.
Yep,
Second girl.
That's awesome. Hometown girl, and
Yep.
just been here and been at the church for almost all your life, right?
Yeah. I came for high school and 16 years old, and really I asked my parents, can I go to church where I go to school? And they let me come. And
That's cool.
so our whole family is here now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, you've been director of our small groups for how many years now? Is it 3 years now?
3 going on 4. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. And that's awesome. And we're excited. You've got 2 kids.
2 kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. 7 years apart. So a 20-year-old and a 13-year-old. Very different stages in life.
Sure.
But it's fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for being here today. We're going to be talking about small groups and just a little bit about how they impact the church. And I think I want to encourage all you pastors and leaders, small group directors, lean in, pull out some notes, because I think it's going to be really good. First question I would ask you guys is, how would you define small groups, and what is the purpose of a small group? Any one of you guys could answer.
Yeah. Well, I can go ahead.
Go for it.
So I think the purpose of a small group, when I think about it, and it's really whether you have a large church or a small church, it's just to build community first and foremost. Without community, there's really nowhere for people to kind of stick. And we see that. Megan, I know you see that with your ladies. It's like family.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I think it's a place where you're not impacting people as as much as you think you are just by having them in the seats for a couple of hours on a Sunday morning. And so for us here, we know that people are getting discipled, connected, and taken care of in a small group setting. And Meagan does that so well.
Well, I love the thought we read this week, Jethro and Moses. And, it's a lot of pressure to put on a senior pastor or a staff to, hey, it's your job and responsibility to disciple the entire church, with intentionality. And so really the way to do that is with small groups, like I think about the different ladies that we have the privilege of like walking with and like encouraging them to take those next steps. It's just an incredible place for them to find their place and their people, and it makes a big church. Bethany is a huge church with multi campuses. Like it makes a big thing feel very small and meaningful and authentic. So, yeah.
Well, I think that's really, really great. So if now that you understand it and maybe the pastors and leaders understand the purpose of small groups, what do you feel like are the building blocks or really the foundations of a small group to really make a good small group run well?
I think the first thing you have to do is you have to establish some leaders. And I think that can be the hardest place to start because it's scary to empower people. I think we do that really well from our senior leadership down. Pastor Jonathan's great at empowering. You're great at empowering. And so you have to establish a core that what we do here at all of our campuses, whether it's a new campus that's just getting started and we haven't even really figured out who's leading, is we begin to establish and develop who is our core team. We call it our core team. And then from there, we build out a leadership team, and they are not just serving, but they're also leading small groups. And that's the other aspect of that is when you're looking for those leaders, I would say first look at who is faithful to come to church. Second, who is faithful to serve. They don't, they're not really leading because they speak well. They're leading because they're faithful. And if they're faithful, they're going to want to serve people. And anybody can invite a few people to their home for coffee. So it's getting away from that idea that this is a huge thing that I'm giving over to a group of people that I don't know very well, and just saying, hey, I'm empowering some people to invite people into their home, to have a cup of coffee together and to talk about Jesus. And that's the first step. If you can gather a few people, whether you have a church of 50 people or 1,500, if you can begin to develop that core team and see who those people are and then empower them to go out and invite people into a small group setting and simplify first.
Yes, I think that's really
great.
good. Meagan, any thoughts on that?
Well, I think too, one of the things I personally have benefited from with the leadership is that I'm leading a group myself, but I also have someone on our staff team that is also, accessible to me if I'm having something go on with my group or if I have a question about something. And so I think too, like just setting up that structure, like she's saying, for accountability, for encouragement. Years ago we would joke, once you start a B group, you're leading for the rest of eternity, and we would kind of joke about it like, oh man, I can do this. But I think even something that we've done in recent years is set up like a semester where it's fall to December and spring, and then you take the summer off. And I think especially with adults and families, it's very doable. It meets with their rhythm. So I just think like setting up some of that structure is also kind of relieve some of that pressure, and that fearful, scary thing to people of like, oh, I don't know what that looks like. Hey, I'm committing 4 months of my life to lead this group. And if, and we'll reassess at the end of that and kind of go from there. But just another thought I had.
Really, really great. So the next question I want to ask you guys is what would make a really good small group? Because I've been leading groups now. Honestly, when I first got saved, I was put in a small group immediately. From the altar to, hey, do you want to come to my small group? And then I was asked to lead a small group. And it took me, honestly, truthfully, it took me about a year to start my own small group because I was just intimidated. I thought, I don't know enough of the Bible. I just don't know how to do this thing. And I didn't know if I needed to preach or prophesy or whatever, right? I had no clue. So, will you guys just tell me what is, Megan, you can maybe even tell me a little bit how, and y'all both lead small groups. Tell me a little bit about just what does a small group look like for you?
So for me, even back to the days of the youth, I think each small group kind of has their own culture. And I think for me, one of the strengths that kind of makes leading a group easier is to really know who I am and like things about my personality and skill set that I bring to the table that maybe the next person doesn't. You know, it's kind of like with your kids. You know, God puts your kids in your family for a reason. You have what it takes to raise those kids. And so I think about that a lot within the small group dynamic. So, you know, sometimes I'll start the night off with like an icebreaker game just to, you know, they're adults, they're working, they're doing all the things. They want to have fun too. So maybe we'll do an icebreaker or this or that. And it just kind of gets people talking. And then some of the other building blocks, you know, I usually will start the night out like, hey, this is what we're going to talk about tonight. I'll kind of get conversations started. But to me, a successful group and the ones that I love the most are when I share something and then it's like popcorn. This one starts talking and that sparks something in this. And you know, you get to the end of the night and you're like, man, everybody contributed, everybody shared, you know, and some encouraged other people, some shared vulnerability. And then I always like to end in prayer and just ask for prayer requests, you know, and sometimes ladies are carrying things that you are completely oblivious to, you know, and so you open up. And sometimes I'll even have some of those other ladies, hey, would you mind leading out in prayer for this person, especially if it's something that I know that they're passionate about, you know, somebody maybe just walked through a scary diagnosis and they really just have faith for healing. Hey, why don't you pray for so and so, you know? So I think those are some of the things. Just have fun. Be true to who you are. And then ultimately, it's just to get them engaged, get them talking, you know, because they're hearing the message on Sundays, they're processing. But I think giving them a chance to really dialogue, like this is the pressure point that spoke to me, or this is the area, you know, the Holy Spirit highlighted, and getting them to, because if they can acknowledge it, then they can be empowered to grow in that area. So I think just facilitating conversation. I'm not there to preach and over talk. I'm just to get it started and then just see what happens, you know, sit back and watch.
That's really, really good.
It's really good. Yeah.
So, you and your husband have led a co-ed group, like a couples group before, and my wife and I have led a couples group, and there are some different dynamics there
Yeah.
than just a ladies group or a men's group, and it's different. Will you describe a little bit of the different dynamics there in a couples group than just a homogeneous group?
Yeah. I think one thing for sure is what we've seen here, especially with our age range. You're going to have young families who maybe have small children. And so I think expectation is one thing. You know, when you gather a group of women together, maybe on a Tuesday night at 7, you can hone in. And when a group of guys get together and maybe go play top golf or something, they can cut up and then also, you know, have times of prayer. But when you get together as a family, the purpose is a little bit different, right? You may not be digging into God's word as deeply, but you're gathering together with the purpose of building relationships that revolve around Jesus. They're godly relationships. So many people go off to work and have relationships outside of the church that are secular and have nowhere to come together and build community. And so I think that was the biggest thing that I saw when we were doing our marriage and family group. It was we were going to get into the word a bit, but we were developing relationships and community with other couples doing life, you know, the same way that we were, having the same struggles with, you know, managing time and finances and
Raising
life.
kids,
Yes.
And so you've got to have the expectation in the right place for those types of groups. And they're very fruitful. Those are some of my favorite, actually, memories, you know.
They're needed so much because you think that you would have a lot of friends, but the more you're married and you get kids and all that, you tend to just focus just on your family.
Yes.
But you still need that community. You still need those people to help grow with, and I think it's really, really great. Another question I would have is that I know we're talking a lot about community, but small groups is a lot about discipleship as well, right? It's about really helping to see people grow. And one of the questions that I have is How are we intentional about discipleship and seeing growth development in people's lives?
Yeah. Well, at Bethany in general, when it comes to small groups, we really put emphasis on the small group is a place where people are going to be discipled. But one of the ways that we do that and that we can lead our teams to do that is we have a structure called a hub structure. Basically, if you're at another church or you hear the word coach, we just put the word hub, leader, in place of coach. And I actually had a testimony of we have a brand new coach on our team this year for the women. And she sent me a message yesterday and she was just telling me how she had visited the groups that she's overseeing and giving me just a positive testimony of how these groups are going. And these are new group leaders that she's going out and visiting their groups and seeing how they're doing. And so, we're discipling those ladies who are freshly leading groups, encouraging them, and just giving them honest feedback, but just encouragement, because it's so hard when you're leading to know or feel like you're doing it well, but there's someone there that we're walking you alongside of someone else. We're not just saying go out and do this and there's no support.
Yeah.
There's a place that you're being supported in, and before you do any of that, you've gone through our process here. So you've gone through our life books and our family books and our purpose books, and so that's really the genesis of it all. But then when you step out and lead that group, you've got someone who's partnering with you and you can be encouraged by.
Yeah, that's so good. Meagan, you mentioned a little bit about that earlier. You thought that was so important.
Yes.
With the ladies that you're working with right now, how are you intentionally helping them grow, taking them from one place to the other?
Sure. I think the easiest way for me, honestly, is just to ask them, what do you feel like the Lord is speaking to you? Like, what are your next steps? I was thinking this morning, even last year was the year of missions. We're at Passports and Passages. Everybody's going. And one of the practical ways that I personally was like, I need to help empower my ladies who are going on these trips. They've all been asked to prepare their testimony. Some of them have done that before. Some have never in their whole life ever even thought, what is my testimony? So I remember one lady, she was new to my group. She's been at Bethany for years, but new to the group. She's really getting involved. And I just gave that challenge one night at B group. Hey, in the next couple of weeks, why don't you just take time in your devotion time, like just write it out in your journal or type it out. Well, a couple of weeks passed and we come back together and she walks in with a stack of papers and I'm like, what does she have? And she sits down and when she begins to share, she's like, well, you challenged us to write out our testimony. I don't really want to share it verbally, but I typed it out and I've got one for everybody. So she passed out the papers and I thought, wow, what a cool, number one, she did it. She sat down and put pen to paper, but then she shared it with everyone else. And I think that's the thing for so many people. Even inviting people to their group is that scary factor of, well, what do I say? What if I don't know the right words? Or what if it's, I stumble or whatever? And so for her, it just she jumped over that hurdle of, I've never done this before. Well, now she has. So now I can go on a trip and share it with people, So I think each person is at a different spot, in their walk with the Lord. So just trying to identify and sometimes, being very strategic and just ask them, not spending all this time in prayer or whatever, but just, hey, what is the Lord, and they'll tell you, I really feel like the Lord's asking me to use my voice more. And so I just put a little mental note. Hey, if there's, hey, we're going to lead out in prayer at the end of group. Why don't you use your voice? Coming up with practical ways that I can come alongside them, and what God's already encouraging them to do. But those are just a couple ways. I just ask. I'm like, hey, what is it? How can I help? There's some people that you just encourage them, hey, I think you could lead a group. And some are ready to do that. Yeah, let me do it. Others are like, why don't you co-lead with me? And so I think just being available to really walk it through with them. Even Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ. I'm not perfect. I'm figuring this out myself, but come along for the ride, But yeah, I think I just ask them.
Good.
Just ask them.
It's really, really good. You could have a word of knowledge or you just ask
Sure,
them.
just ask them. I mean, both work. I'm just saying.
Just ask them. Well, how can I help you? What are you looking for? I don't need to get something from the Holy Spirit. That's really, really great. That's fantastic. Okay, so we're going to get deep dive a little bit further into like some of the nitty gritty. And these are a little bit of more difficult questions, if I can ask some. So you get people together, right? And you know how people are. They're awesome until there's conflict, right? And
Yes.
there's maybe a issue here, or maybe two people are having issues, or you start to notice some things going on. How do you handle the conflict? Now, I know there's some pastors that's got their notebooks out now because they're trying to figure out, man, how do I handle conflicts in groups? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Megan, I think you've done a really great job of that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So I literally have had a couple different things through the years that have popped up. This is the age of social media, and everybody, they have something that pops up in their life, and unfortunately, a lot of times they don't come to you with it or somebody else at the church. They get that computer out and they just get to
Yes.
going. And, I've had things like that happen over the years where, and I see it. And of course, in my own flesh, I'm like, oh, come on. Like, ugh. But I'm like, we're just going to extend grace or just let it pass. But then you have those times where other ladies in your group, they see it and they're contacting you. What do I do? And I remember that happened a couple years ago. And the first person I called was Jen. I was like, hey, I know it's a Friday, you're off, but like, help, 911, because there's some issues that come up that you just don't even, it's like a kid acting out. They're looking for a certain response and you just don't even give them the benefit of that. But then there's other times where, as a pastor and a shepherd, you see, hey, this can create havoc in some of the lives and hearts of these other ladies. And as bad as I don't want to step out and say something, I need to keep it. So I remember I called Jen. I was like, what do I do? And after that conversation, I just felt like, you know what? Instead of sending an email or a text message to these ladies, I'm just going to record a little voice memo on my phone. They can hear my tone, they can hear my heart, and was just honest about, hey, you may have seen this. This is what I want you to know from my heart. I'm not offended. I'm not carrying this. Please don't take up offense for me. Don't engage with the post. Don't get on there and, because it doesn't help anything. I was like, my biggest, I guess, request for you is guard your heart. Don't let this, people are hurt and hurt people hurt people, extend grace, don't engage, and just keep on moving, and I think it just, it encourages them to like, not take on a spirit of offense and bitterness, and honestly just bringing it back to the word, like we've all made mistakes. Forgive, and forgive quickly. Don't hold on to it. Don't let it fester, because it will wreak havoc, within your group, within your dynamics. So yeah, we've had our share.
Yeah. I would say too, speaking to marriage and family groups, because we've had, a lot of conversation about individual like men or women, but we had years ago when we did ours, these people don't even come to our church anymore, but they've moved out of state. But we had a couple that were having some issues in their marriage, and they walked into the room and there was stuff going on, and it was like, how are we going to navigate that? And I think it's so important as leaders that you rise up above it.
That's great.
It's so tempting as a woman to want to get in and like, how can I help you and take care? But in that moment, what I had to do was rise above it. My husband rise above it. Let them figure it out, because that's not the time and place.
Sure.
And if they want to talk to us after, that's fine. If they need to step out of the room, that's fine. As long as they're not causing chaos for the rest of the people there, we're not engaging in that moment, because there is a temptation for that sort of stuff to take up the space for the rest of the meeting.
That's right.
And so even navigating those couple dynamics, I think in the same way of just saying like, we're going to rise above this right now, and we'll take care of anything that may arise
No, that's
later.
great. That is great. There will be oftentimes just situations sometimes where people will maybe have a different comment, or they want to get off on something. And I love what you're saying, rise above it. Sometimes this is not the time. Hey, we'll talk more about this after the group. I love to dialogue with you one-on-one about that.
Yes.
Just not in this group. I think just having that strategy even going into it, because when you're dealing with people, there's going to always be somebody that's going to come up and maybe say something here or there that's a little bit off color, but it's okay. You can just deal with it afterwards and not have to deal with it within the group. So I think that's really, really great. So not only conflict, and we're talking about discipleship, but how do we even get the group to even engage in evangelism? Because I think it's a lot of people love to just get their groups and they kind of get around and drink some coffee and talk and those type of things, and that's great. And I think there are groups that are for that. But also, I think it's great to have a mission. And that's what I love about our pastor is that he's really encouraged us and challenged us to have missions and to go on a missions trip, to go out and do things. And we have groups that go to nursing homes and go all over the place within the context of a group. And I love that. So talk to us a little bit about how groups evangelize.
Yeah. So it's crazy because I was just talking to a lady the other night at our prayer service, and she is just taking her group and doing so many things, nursing home ministry and street ministry and so many wonderful things. And I think what I've learned along the way to engage my own group in these things is that if I bring it up at the table every week, they're going to start to ask questions about it. You know, it may be slow moving, but their interest is piqued, and I don't shut up about it. But when I stop talking about it, no one's moving.
It's really good.
And so I started to do that years ago, just bringing everything that I'm doing, everything that I want to engage them in, if it's an outreach that's happening, if it's a huge project that we're doing, if it's a missions trip, I'm going to talk about it every week. And even to the point of like leadership, hey, you could lead a group, you could lead an outreach, bringing that up and calling it out of them, because people do want to stay comfortable. We all want to stay comfortable, and we have to remember that we're not just there, like you're saying. It's great to have a cup of coffee, but we serve a greater purpose, and even as a group, we serve a greater purpose. And so for me, it's just a continual reminder of this is what's going on, and I give the opportunity. And then at times I know where different people have different strengths and different giftings, and so I'm personally saying, hey, I would love for you to help me in this area. And you know, you're actually highlighting a gifting that they have that maybe is laying dormant, and they get to use it, and that makes them, you know, kind of open up that space that maybe hasn't been used in a while. And so just looking for those opportunities with people, because and especially as a woman, and I don't want to just talk about women, but sometimes you can go to that place, and I think men too, in that season where you're raising kids, you're just like, the only outreach I can have right now is bringing orange slices to my kids' baseball game.
Right.
And it's like, no, like we can do more.
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
Sure.
Meagan?
Well, I was going to say last fall, Pastor Jonathan, that was something he did, like a Zoom call with all the B group leaders, and he really encouraged us to be evangelistic in the whole semester. And literally on that call that night, I really felt the Holy Spirit say, that's for you. Like, you need to mix it up a little bit. And previously, like, our group had met here at the church. Well, if you're a church person, sure, you're going to come to the church Bible study, no problem. If you're in my neighborhood, don't know Jesus, probably not showing up at my church for a Tuesday night, girls' night, whatever. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to do something I've never done before. I'm going to open up my home on Friday mornings, and the whole purpose is for the ladies in my neighborhood. I'm going to invite them. I'm going to text them. I'm going to drop off stuff. And you know, being very honest, it was one of those things where you're like, is anybody going to show up?
Right.
Are they coming? You know, because they're not saved, you know? And it was a really cool thing. Some of the ladies from my group came and were there as well. But I did have one neighbor of the whole semester. I had one neighbor who was off one Friday, and she came and we talked about faith. And at the end of that message, I felt the Lord like encouraging me to share something about my personal story. I did, and this neighbor who doesn't know the Lord, really doesn't know me other than we both got kids that play basketball at the end of the street. She begins to share, hey, I had a very similar experience. And she opened up about her own life in this group, you know, that she didn't know any of the other ladies. It was the first time meeting them. And I'm like, man, I would have missed that opportunity, you know, to speak to her, for her to know, hey, that girl that lives down there at the end of the street, she knows Jesus. And if I run into some kind of issue, I can go to her for help. And so I think even with one of the girls that we like co-led, the location of our meeting was strategic of like, hey, I'm not going to do it in my home. People don't know me. Let's go to a local coffee shop. So I think like those practical ways of, I'm going to go where the people are. I'm going to go where there's at least, you know, the least amount of hurdles to get them there. You know, come drink a cup of coffee at Starbucks. Let's talk about Jesus. You know, people show up.
And counting that one
And counting the one.
God cares about that one.
It's true.
Yes, he does.
You
It's
know?
true.
Yeah.
No, it's so great. That's impactful. I'm reminded of when my wife and I first got married, and we would have a small group in our home. And I didn't really know our neighbors very well, and we rolled so much we didn't really have time to meet, and that's my fault. But so I never even met the guy, but we would have people come to our home. They would see the cars pull up, and they would see people walk in, they would see people walk out, and those type of things, and they noticed. And I'll never forget one time I was out washing my car, and my neighbor pulled up. And he said, "Hey, Rev, how you doing?" And I said, "What are you talking about?" So you're a pastor, right? I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're a pastor at Bethany, right?" We never had a conversation. I
Wow.
said, "How did you know this?" "Well, I've been watching these people coming into your home. Y'all been doing Bible studies over there, huh?" Just noticed the whole
Sure.
thing. But it was a testimony. It was a witness to that gentleman. And I had an opportunity just to talk with him and even pray for him. And just having that meeting in my home was so impactful to him. And so I
Sure.
think that's really, really, really cool. Well, as we get ready to close, I just want you to encourage a pastor who's maybe thinking about, maybe they don't have small groups in their church, and they're thinking about it. They have volunteer teams, but just encourage a pastor to why small groups is important. We kind of talked about this at the beginning, but just encourage a pastor why small groups are so important.
Yeah, I think it's exactly what Megan talked about at the beginning when she talked about Moses and Jethro.
That's right.
That vision that you're building your church on it's greater than just you, and it's greater than just
great.
your small staff. And so to see that's dreaming, that's hoping, that's believing in faith that God's gonna bring the people if you steward what you have
Yeah.
well. And part of stewarding that is making sure that the people in your sphere are connected, taken care of.
Yep.
And the way to do that is, I believe, with all my heart, through small groups. And so I would say, do it.
great.
Just
Yeah.
do it.
That's great.
Yeah, and just start. I think that's the thing. Maybe you don't have 25 leaders. Maybe you have 4. Start with 4. Maybe there's one men's group leader. Maybe there's one ladies. Like, start with that, because you'll begin to see more people, grow in their walk with the Lord, grow in their faith, and they'll begin to step out and begin to just multiply organically. And it just creates space. Like, don't despise the small. Like,
Yeah.
God can blow that thing up and expand it in a heartbeat with just your yes, So just start. You can do it.
Just do it.
You can do it. Just do
Hey,
it.
that's what my small group leader told me. That's how he got me to start my small group. He said, "Man, Nike, just
Yep.
do it, man. Just do it. Jump out there and do it." And I did, and God is blessed it. So thank y'all so much. Thank
Sure.
y'all so much for being here. And thank you for joining us today. I hope this has blessed you. I know it's encouraging. It's encouraged me about small groups, and I know it's going to encourage you. Again, don't forget, we have Empower BoldX Conference that's coming up June 12th through the 14th. We're going to be talking even more about this, and love for you guys to come to Baton Rouge, hang out with us. It's going to be a great, great time. I don't know if you guys noticed, but I have my Bethany College shirt on that I'm representing, and we have a Bethany training school that's training up leaders, and we'd love for you to come and be a part of that too. That's bethanycollege.net. You can get more information there. Hey, until next time, we love you guys. We'll see you next time.